As we all know, lots of different things have changed since March last year, and just one of them is the job market. Well, how many jobs are out there, and what kind of jobs are out there too? And what roles have simply disappeared over the last 10 months? It's all a knock on effect in West Yorkshire, of course. I'm joined now by Mark Gill, who's Managing Director at Headway Recruitment. It operates in Leeds and Bradford as well. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Pete.
I imagine that hearing these numbers about increased unemployment, that comes as no surprise to you. You must be used to hearing about some of the situations that people are facing over the last 12 months or so.
That's right, unfortunately. And yes, I can certainly sympathise with Annabelle's story. It's a trend that we've seen across the city, with obviously certain sectors hit particularly hard. But on the flip side, there are positives as well. The financial and business services sector has been fairly resilient in our experience, as well as the manufacturing and creative and digital sectors.
I imagine for many people who have been made redundant recently, far too many, of course, people experiencing it. The immediate aftermath of finding out that you've been made redundant, it can take some time to find your feet. But at a time when it's particularly daunting because you need an income, you need a job, you might have a family to provide for. It's incredibly difficult for people at the moment to go through that and pick themselves up, isn't it?
It is. It is so tough. I mean, the challenges that everyone, are facing on a daily basis are obviously magnified, by being unemployed. We're seeing it. The individuals that we're speaking to, and the advice that we really give to people is to, spend time reevaluating your career individually, to look at your own skill sets, and really to promote yourself, online, looking at your online presence. For most people, that tends to be, LinkedIn, updating your experience and your skills, but also just being comfortable with the new ways of working, really. So honing, video interviewing skills, taking those practical steps to be comfortable in front of the camera. We're seeing roughly maybe 80% of our clients are now choosing to interview that way.
And as a recruiter working for a recruitment firm, what are some of the trends that you've spotted, particularly here in West Yorkshire, in terms of which sort of jobs, which sort of industries are recruiting at the moment?
Yeah, so clearly, the retail and hospitality sector have taken a real hit. But as I alluded to earlier, I suppose there is demand in certain sectors. So, for example, online learning companies, IT and technical firms, and digital marketing, firms wanting to promote themselves online and adapt their business models, to work in the digital economy, really. And clearly, supermarkets, obviously we've got Asda with a large presence in the city. There are sectors and companies that are growing, but the competition for those roles is growing all the time.
Is there a particular problem in a particular part of West Yorkshire? Obviously, industries vary quite wildly, don't they, between different towns and cities? Is there any area that's particularly affected in terms of what you've spotted?
Well, with our office in Leeds and in Bradford, we have seen that Bradford seems to have been disproportionately affected. Now, whether that's the younger demographic of the city, or the heavy reliance on the manufacturing sector, we have certainly seen Bradford take a hit. Although on the positive side, I know Bradford has been recognised as the second most entrepreneurial city in the country. So there are certainly positives to take out of it, but it's been a tough time for a number of cities across the region. And what we've seen is candidates are really competing for jobs now, not just in the local region, but employers are increasingly likely to employ people with the right skills, but remotely. So, previously people might have been competing, in a 30-mile radius for jobs, and then they're now competing with candidates maybe nationwide, or even across the same time zone. So it's certainly a competitive landscape out there.
What do you think, Mark, has caused young people to be particularly affected? I guess it's the nature of their work. Is it because they were working in sort of hospitality and retail? I mean, for most people, sort of first start into work, that's where they might find their first job. Is that the cause of that?
I would say that's a large factor, yes, and I don't know, perhaps being cynical, but possibly employers bear a lower redundancy cost if they're
Yeah.
looking to get rid of people who've been with them for a shorter period of time, which invariably tends to be, the younger individuals. So yes.
Well, thank you very much for talking us through it. Just finally, Mark, if anybody is in that situation where they are perhaps recently been made redundant, what would you suggest as their first step when it comes to picking themselves back up?
I think just keeping skills up to date. I mean, obviously taking a positive attitude and looking at the areas that they can improve on. Looking at essentially home learning, gaining transferable skills, and really just showing potential employers, how you've adapted during the period. How resilient you've been, and what you can bring to their organisations.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mark. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Pete. Thanks.
Mark Gill, who's managing director at Headway Recruitment. They operate in Leeds and Bradford as well. Just a bit of an idea of the situation affecting people here in West Yorkshire when it comes to unemployment.